It's Tuesday. You know what that means. It's time to put in some waiver wire claims here as we head into week 4 of the fantasy football season. Welcome to the ADP, the Average Dudes podcast. I am your Average Dude host, Matt Mormann. And this week, we've got an interesting group of waiver wire options this week. There's a couple very obvious ones at the very top. A couple guys who probably should be owned in most 12-team leagues already, and anything deeper than that for sure. But then we kind of got just a lot of other options, and a couple of them are going to be good. A couple of them will be duds, I'm sure, coming out of it. But, I think this is a break the fab week for a couple guys, and then a shoot darts and cheap spots and the other guys. A couple of decent streamer options, too, for you if you're in a 1-week pickle like I am in a couple of leagues. So let's start out with the running backs this week. And the big story of the week was Devon Achane of the Miami Dolphins. The rookie running back went from, 5 or 9 total yards in his career to over 200 yards this week for the Dolphins against the Broncos. He is available in 84% of ESPN leagues, 59% of Yahoo, and 53% of sleeper leagues. So he's out there, not going to be in every league, but he's going to be out there in most leagues. So he's got to grab. If you watch football this weekend, you know why. The thing that really encourages me, though, with Devon Achane is the fact that his 2 touchdowns were 2 of the first 3 touchdowns of the game before it got 2 of his touchdowns, I should say. 2 of his touchdowns were 2 of the first 3 that were scored. And so he was involved early on in the game plan. What's interesting is, in a funny way, Raheem Mostert, he had this monster game, but I actually almost view him as less now than what I did a week ago at this point, if that makes any sense at all, because Achane had a game plan in place to be used, and he executed on his game plan. So Achane went from being really kind of nothing to a part of this game. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where Devon Achane's a workhorse running back, right? I do think he's just too small for that, but he's a very explosive player. When he's given those opportunities, we have seen what can happen. And look, this upcoming matchup against Buffalo Bills, it's a tough one, but I think he can come through for you there and for the rest of the season. I think he will definitely be an option to be used. Next up, Zach Moss, just worth checking. He's only available in about 22% of leagues across ESPN, Yahoo, and Sleeper, but just make sure that he's owned in your leagues for the next couple weeks while Jonathan Taylor is still out. He is the guy in Indy, and a guy getting that much work should be pretty good for your fantasy squad. He had 30 rush attempts against the Ravens. Anyone who gets that kind of work is going to be great for you in fantasy. And he is lined up for that kind of work. And when Jonathan Taylor does come back, Zach Moss is still worth holding on to for your bench as kind of a handcuff option now that we have seen what he can do when he is the guy. And speaking of handcuff options, I do have a whole list of those we're going to go through here in just a second. But first, I'm going to say about one guy who's kind of emerging from a handcuff to a co-starter, and that's Roschon Johnson. I've mentioned him a couple times now on the Waiver Wire show, and he's a guy that I think is definitely worth putting on your bench right now. And if you're desperate at running back, I think you might be able to play Roschon Johnson this week, which I know is scary because the Chicago Bears totally stink, but they're playing Denver this week. Roschon Johnson's available in 77% of ESPN leagues, 52% of Yahoo leagues, and 41% of sleeper leagues. He's a guy who's been getting more and more involved in the offense. We keep on hearing this almost every Sunday, I feel like. There's a tweet or two out there of, hey, Bears coaches want to get Roschon Johnson more involved today. They've been working him in. This is a chance to really get more involved in a great matchup with a Denver Broncos defense that we just saw get ran all over the place on by those Miami Dolphins. He did play 45% of the snaps this past week. It's hard to really gauge that, though. With it being a blowout, you don't really know what the coaches were thinking. So 2 rookie running backs there. I've got a couple more rookie running backs to pick up. These ones are kind of just handcuff stashes. These ones are not ones to spend a whole lot of fab on. If you need a player to play anytime soon, I prefer those other running backs. I prefer, a couple of these wide receivers as flex options for right now. But these are definitely guys to have in your back pocket. We've seen running back injuries change the entire landscape already this season. That's not going to slow down. So just some handcuffs to note here. Rico Dowdle for the Dallas Cowboys. He's got the Patriots this week. Tyjae Spears, he played over 50% of the snaps this week for the Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry is up there in age. He's got a toe problem also. I think Tyjae Spears is the guy. I've been stashing him on a lot of rosters over the last couple of weeks. Kendre Miller made his season debut last week for New Orleans, rather, against the Packers. Melvin Gordon, because Gus Edwards suffered a concussion. Justice Hill missed last week's game. If the Ravens are down on guys, Melvin Gordon might be a guy you can, in a desperation situation, play. I think I'd prefer playing Roschon Johnson over Melvin Gordon this week. I'll leave that one up to Tanner to decide. He gets to choose between the ugliness there. But I think Melvin Gordon's a guy who, in an absolute worst-case scenario, you could pick up and play this week if there is no Gus Edwards or Justice Hill. The last one, keep an eye out. Make sure that he's still rostered, and that's our boy Zach Charbonnet. He looks good when he gets the ball. He just doesn't get the ball very much yet. And I think the tide is maybe starting to turn towards him a little bit. I've seen some snap count data that shows that he's getting on the field more and more over the last couple of weeks. Walker's coming off the field a little bit more. So that is going to give him more opportunities to do something. And I think that he's a really good running back. And every time I've seen him with the ball in his hands, I thought he's looked really good. And so he's just a guy. Make sure he's on your bench somewhere if he's out there available. Don't drop him if you drafted him. I know he's been irrelevant so far this season, and that's disappointing, especially for me. I was somebody who thought that Charbonnet could have value as a flex option in the first half of the season, and that just has not been the case. But I think he still remains a high-end handcuff option, and that has value, as we've seen. Let's move on over to the wide receivers now. And we're going to start things out with another rookie. Man, rookies are really stepping up here early on in the season. And Tank Dell, we talked about him last week also. He's still out there in 77% of Yahoo League, 77% of ESPN leagues, 52% of sleeper leagues. I could not find his Yahoo data. Yahoo actually couldn't find data for most of these guys. He was wide receiver 6 last week. And he had 10 targets in week 2. He had 7 targets in week 3. He continues to rise. He continues to look awesome. This Houston Texans offense continues to look kind of decent. And high passing volume because they tend to be trailing, but this week they weren't. And CJ Stroud is looking as competent as you can ask for a rookie quarterback in week 3. So Tank Dell is the emerging weapon there. He's kind of the guy to go try to grab. He might be listed as Nathaniel Dell in your league, depending on what they call him, but Tank is his nickname. That's kind of what most people call him by. So Tank Dell, Nathaniel Dell, the Houston Texans wide receiver. Go find him and pick him up if he is still available. I think, Achane should be owned in most leagues. If Achane is already gone off the board, Dell would be my number 1 overall pickup. Next up is a pair of guys here, and this is fallout from the Mike Williams injury for the Los Angeles Chargers. It's both Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnston for the Chargers. Palmer's out there in almost every league. He's only owned in 5% of ESPN. He's only owned in like 1% of sleeper leagues. He's out there in the vast majority of leagues. And if you need a guy to play this week, if you lost Mike Williams and you don't have a wide receiver to plug in, if you need a flex option for this week, Josh Palmer's your guy. They're facing the Vegas Raiders. It's a very easy matchup. Should be very good production there for these Chargers. And I don't think Keenan Allen's going to get 20 targets again. He could. He's Keenan Allen, so maybe he does. But I think Josh Palmer, we've seen him step up when opportunities have arisen before. He's not going to be a wide receiver 1 type, but he can be a serviceable player. I think KJ Osborne, right? That's a very similar mold player to Josh Palmer. I think he can get you by this week. Now, they are on bye the week after, which makes things a little bit tricky here because do you really want to spend too much fab or do you really want to get too excited about Josh Palmer, who I think is a short-term player with only 1 week of that short-term play? And that's where we get after the bye week. I think that's when we see Quentin Johnston really start to emerge. The rookie first-round pick for the Chargers. He's kind of been playing pretty sparingly so far this year. I think that's what a lot of us expected was for him to kind of be in a backup role. And then in the second half of the year, potentially take over. I think that if you can get your hands on Quentin Johnston and you have a bench spot that you don't need to use for the next 2 weeks, Johnston's a great guy to pick up in stash. He's only available in half of the leagues. He's available 54% of ESPN and 49% on Sleeper. But look, Big Mike's injury has opened up opportunity for a couple of guys here. Quentin Johnston is definitely stylistically a lot like Mike Williams. That's what a lot of us said at the NFL draft this year, was that when they drafted Quentin Johnston, they just drafted their new Mike Williams. Well, unfortunately, Mike Williams just tore his ACL. He's done for the year. Quentin Johnston with a great opportunity from here on. I do just think you need to show some patience, though. I don't think he's going to have a great game this week, and then he's on bye the week after. So if you're going to spend anything on Quentin Johnston, know that going into it. Know that going into it that you may have to wait for 3 weeks for it to come through, but the ceiling is very high when it does. I think he's my favorite wide receiver stash at this point. I think I prefer him over Jackson Smith and Jigba, for example, because even though I prefer Smith and Jigba as a player, I don't know when his opportunity is coming, and I think it is worthwhile to go with a slightly lesser player who could have more games at his upside at this stage of the season. Next up, another 1 week option here. Adam Thielen, old grandpa, going back to Minnesota this week for a revenge game matchup. He's available in 46% of ESPN leagues, 42% of the leagues on Sleeper. Andy Dalton being his quarterback is actually a great thing. Dalton, I still love Bryce Young as a prospect. I think Bryce Young's going to turn out really, really good. But rookie quarterbacks do tend to struggle for their offensive weapons quite a bit. They just don't. They don't have a full field for the offense year one, right? Justin Herbert was a major exception for a reason. And so you bring in a veteran like Andy Dalton into this offense, and we saw Adam Thielen put up, 31 points this past week. And he's facing an awful Minnesota secondary, and I think he should be able to really take advantage of that with Andy Dalton as his quarterback. Also, go check in. DJ Chark might be available also. I think he's also a decent streaming option for this week. Just a couple of stash candidates here. Calvin Austin, the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver. I think he's available in a lot of deeper leagues. He's had a couple big plays this year. I don't think he's a bad guy just throwing the back of your bench in deep leagues. Marvin Mims is a guy across the board, stashing some Marvin Mims. He continues to look really, really good in his limited sample sizes and his limited opportunities, but it's definitely a guy I believe in. Michael Gallup is a guy for the Cowboys that I think could be really, really good this week. Also, he's kind of a streaming option this week, facing the New England Patriots, who are down 3 corners, and it didn't really show much against the Jets. Bad weather, Zach Wilson, that's kind of a perfect storm of hiding defensive problems. But I think that Michael Gallup could really take advantage of that Patriots secondary this week. One last thing as kind of a thing to watch out for, if you've got an extra spot and you look ahead a little bit and you see something in week 2, in 2 weeks from now, the Kansas City Chiefs have the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are definitely a defense to target. The Vikings are a defense to pick up wide receivers and running backs and play them against them. The Chiefs have them in 2 weeks from now. So if you want to give it a shot, Rashee Rice, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, any of them that are out there, I think they could have a decent game in 2 weeks from now. All right, let's go on up to your quarterbacks, and we'll finish things out with the terrible, awful tight end position. We'll do quarterbacks next. So I wrote this one before last night's game, and I don't think I'm going to let last night deter me on this, though. Matthew Stafford, because, look, he threw for 300-plus yards in each of the first 2 games. Last night, Trey Hendrickson was just all over him all game long. He barely had any time in the pocket. They couldn't convert a third down and save their life. For some reason, they got away from Puka Nacua, and they featured Tutu Atwell in the offense. I still don't understand that, and I'm very frustrated by that as someone who had quite a bit of Puka in a couple of important leagues. But Matthew Stafford, here's his upcoming schedule. At Indianapolis, home Philadelphia, home Arizona, home Pittsburgh, at Dallas. And remember, with Dallas, they no longer have Trayvon Diggs. He is done for the year with a torn ACL. I think that's a great schedule. The Philly secondary is banged up also, and Baker Mayfield really wasn't able to take advantage of that last night very much, but Mike Evans did get in the end zone for you, so that was nice to see. He also had that amazing one-handed catch, by the way, where he just plucked that thing out of the sky. But anyway, on Matthew Stafford, I think there's a 5-game stretch where he could be an option for you, especially if you're hurting at quarterback if you drafted, whether it be Justin Fields or Joe Burrow as your one, if you Anthony Richardson, if we don't get him back real soon, his concussion, so hopefully we will. But I think Stafford could be an option for you over the next month or so. And don't forget, he will be getting Cooper Kupp back soon, we think at least. So that could also be a great thing. All right, now we're going to get into some muddy waters. These are going to feel a little icky. Take a little Pepto-Bismol if you need to pick up and play one of these guys. Andy Dalton, he's got those Vikings. I talked about with the Adam Thielen matchup. Look, the Vikings let Baker Mayfield have a pretty serviceable week 1. Jalen Hurts didn't do much in week 2, but that was probably because DeAndre Swift just ran all over them. And I don't think I would have to worry about Miles Sanders doing that. And then in week 3, Justin Herbert just had a huge game. So I'm expecting a pass-heavy game script because I think Minnesota can score in Carolina, but then I don't expect Minnesota to be able to stop Carolina because I don't think Minnesota can stop anybody. It's a little ugly. It's going to feel a little icky, but I do think Andy Dalton is a streaming option for this week. Another one. We're not going to feel great about this one either, are we? Russell Wilson. Mr. Unlimited at Chicago this week, and that's pretty much the important part here, right? Look, as ugly as the Denver Broncos are, Russell Wilson has not been completely terrible this season, and the Chicago defense is. So I think that if you're, again, this is kind of if you're in a pickle situation, which it's only week 4, I can't think of really any quarterbacks that are just like done for the year at the moment, or guaranteed to miss this upcoming week. So hopefully you're not in a pickle where you need one of these guys. If you do, though, Russell Wilson against the Bears, I think is a worthwhile option. Or if you're in a 2 QB league, I mean, I'm sure he's owned, but maybe you could get him for cheap for a 1-week play if you're in that desperate of a situation. Also, Jameis Winston, he is back in for the New Orleans Saints. He's facing his former team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it's kind of a middle of the road option matchup here. But with those wide receivers on that team, with Olave and Michael Thomas, even Rashid Shaheed, if we get screw it, I'm going deep Jameis, I think he could come away with a couple big plays for you. And if your quarterback situation is so bad that these are the options that you need to try to go with, go make sure Kyler Murray is not on your waiver wire. We're going into week 4 now. So all those guys who started the year in IR, they should be eligible to get off soon. A lot of leagues, Kyler Murray was being drafted and stashed on IR. But, we've had injuries happen since then. He may have been forced to be dropped by some teams. Some teams may have found themselves in some sticky situations. They didn't have bench spots available that they could just use on him. So go make sure that Kyler Murray is not a free agent in your league. Lastly, we're going to end with everybody's favorite position, the tight ends. And I put in my notes, TE, tight end, IDK. I don't know what to tell you here. So we're just got some streaming options. I have 0 full season options for you at tight end. That's just not how the tight end position works. So I'm just going to give you some guys for this week that could maybe get you by. First and foremost is Luke Musgrave. He's probably the only guy on this list who I would even consider a potentially long-term option. He has the Detroit Lions this week, and if Christian Watson and Aaron Jones, especially Aaron Jones, are out this week, I think he can get more and more involved in this offense. He's been involved in this offense. I think that could continue. Jonnu Smith, I know this one hurts because it's like, why are they even using this guy? You have Kyle Pitts. He has the Jacksonville Jaguars. In the last 2 weeks, he's had 6 targets for 4 catches and 47 yards, and then 8 targets, 5 catches, 37 yards. In PPR, let's get you 8 points each week. If he can get an end zone target, if he can get a touchdown in there too, that's actually a pretty decent day out of the tight end. He's got the Jacksonville Jaguars this week for the Falcons. Adam Troutman. Now, this is a guy who we're going fishing for some points on this one. He has put up back-to-back zeros, but he's playing a lot of snaps, and just like Russell Wilson, he is playing against the Bears this week. So he could be an option for you. And lastly, Hayden Hurst of the Carolina Panthers, much like Andy Dalton, much like Adam Thielen. Pretty much my only note here is he has the Vikings this week. I'm going to give a quick glance here for some defense streaming options. I did not plan this one out. I apologize on that. So let me take a quick look here as I try to pull up some roster percentages and some matchups for this week on defenses. Give me just a second here. Defensive streamers is what I'm looking for. So let me go to roster percent. Defenses. Okay, so hey, the Cincinnati Bengals looked really good against the Rams last night. They do have the Tennessee Titans this week. That's actually really an option for you. It could feel ridiculous to use the Denver Broncos. They do have the Chicago Bears this week, though. Like, just like how I think Russ becomes an option in that game, I think the defense in a complete break glass in case of an emergency moment could be an option for you. The Texans have looked kind of decent for the most part on defense this season. They've got Pittsburgh this week, so they could be an option too for you. Actually, I think that might be my favorite I would go Cincinnati 1. Yeah, Cincinnati first, then Houston, and then I guess it's the Broncos against the Bears. But I don't feel good about that one either. Maybe Atlanta. Also, Atlanta, they go to London for the early morning game. Don't forget about that. Be sure to check your lineup super early on Sunday morning because the Jacksonville and Atlanta game is in London this week. So it's got that very early start time. Let me just filter this by all and see if there's anybody else I'm missing here who could be of note. Let's go roster percentage. Eagles are owned in too many leagues, but they have Washington. So if the Eagles are available, if they were dropped for whatever reason, they do have Washington this week. That'd be a great one to use. The Ravens defense, I'm getting a little bit nervous on because of all these injuries stacking up, but they do have Cleveland this week. That's been more good than it has been bad for fantasy defenses. The Bucks could be an option against Jameis. We know how turnover-prone Jameis Winston, the Saints, could be on offense. So that could be a defense for you as well. All right, we're going to wrap it up with that. I'm not going to do kickers for you. Sorry. If you got kickers, you're on your own on that one. Find somebody playing either indoors or in nice weather against a bad defense. But that's going to do it for me this morning here on the ADP, the Average Dudes podcast. Best of luck putting in those waiver claims this week. Go pick up those players that we talked about. Pick up Devon Achane if he's out there. Pick up Tank Dell for sure. Stash a couple of those running backs. Grab a Chargers wide receiver. And be sure to keep on following us for all this great content. We're going to help you guys out throughout your season on these leagues. Follow us at ADP Dudes on Twitter. Follow the YouTube channel, the Twitter page, all that good stuff. Like and follow. Follow the podcast channel as well on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Apple Music, all those good platforms. If you found me today, you know where to find us. So keep on following us. Keep on getting all that good stuff from us, and we will see you all next time.